Good morning. It is Wednesday, September 9th at 10 a.m. in the morning. Hi, I'm Larry Cedar. I'm back with you for another session on what I call scanning, Sqanning, relaxation technique, which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. So we're back. Took a few days off for the holiday. I hope you all had a good holiday. Hope you're able to relax a little bit, get through the heat. Had a lot of opportunity to think about this technique and think about the significance of it, and talk about it a little bit today before we begin to practice. So, the thought that came to my mind this weekend as I practiced and thought about it and went about my business was that it's extremely difficult to change our basic nature. Our basic nature. And if you've ever had a relationship with someone and there was something about them that you possibly didn't like or hoped would change and tried to change it or suggested a change, or maybe the person said they would change, whatever, you saw that basically people don't change. They basically stay in a kind of a sort of a range, which is okay. That's fine. We learn to love and deal with each other. But I say that because as I speak a lot about this here in these sessions, are the two basic functions of the universe as described by the person that inspired this technique to me, Thaddeus Golis, who wrote The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, is that there is basically contraction or expansion. Contraction, squeeze your hands together, or expansion, release. These are the two basic functions of the universe. And we are conditioned, to contract. And by contraction, I mean to solve problems, to bring thoughts, ideas, materials together, to solve a problem, to advance an agenda. We're conditioned to contract. And as I began to look at the universe this way and saw that everything is either in a state of contraction or expansion, including myself, and saw this as a way to help myself, I began to realize what a conditioned response contraction is. We are designed to contract. When we are faced with a problem, an issue, a challenge, we contract. We think of a solution. We put together ideas, thoughts, materials, and we contract. Unfortunately, and occasionally, to our detriment, we become what I call overly contracted. And how do you know when you're overly contracted? You feel bad. You're working too hard. You become restricted, limited, unmoving, inflexible, impermeable, rigid, solid. But it's our go-to response. We contract, we worry, we obsess, we act. This is what we do. How do we change that? Even if we know that contraction is not good for us, worry, anxiety, how do we know? How do we change that basic response? Well, conditioning, training. There's two selves. There's the reactive self. There's the person that just exists in the world and reacts instinctively to every situation, typically with fear, anxiety, response. Then there's your other self, your aware self, which watches this happen and can take control of the instinctive self and say, I know you want to do this. I know you want to do that, but there's a better way to go. So that's what we're trying to do with scanning. We're trying to change ourselves. We're trying to condition ourselves to move from a place of contraction when we're under stress or duress or dealing with a difficult life circumstance to expansion. It's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult. It's a conditioned response. Contraction is a conditioned response, but you can learn to expand through practice, and that's why we do this practice. This is why we practice scanning. It is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. The incremental release. We're training ourselves to release, to let go, when what we want to do, what we feel we need to do is contract, get tight, think, process, assemble. And that's not to take away from those processes. It's just to say that we all know when we've gone too far, when we're overly contracted. So we're trying to train ourselves to expand. And we do that through practice, as you would practice piano to become a classical pianist. So let's get started. I speak of these things from experience. It's very difficult for me to reverse decades of conditioned response. My go-to response is to contract. So I train myself to expand. Here we go. Put your hands together, squeeze tight, 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 tight. That's contraction. I want you to see what that feels like. This squeezing of the hands represents all of the contracting we do in our life. And by that I mean thinking, planning, forming relationships, doing our work, pulling together thoughts, ideas, materials to advance an agenda or a goal, or to protect ourselves instinctively, we contract. Contract. So that's what it feels like. So I always start every session by doing this and by having you share this experiencing with me, because you can have a physical understanding of what contraction is. You can have a physical sensibility of what it is to contract. And it's always more effective to feel something in my mind than to think something, because a feel is real. It's the real materials. Thoughts are elusive, ephemeral. What are thoughts? Contractions of a sort, but they're not something you feel. So we squeeze our hands together and we say, that's contraction. I am contracted. And that's good. That's strength. That's effectiveness. But when it's taken too far, it becomes rigid, limited, uncomfortable, unmoving, unavailable, impermeable, solid, hard, rigid. All those things that you feel when you feel bad. So we can reverse this state of contraction. If you're still holding your hands tight like I am, it starts to feel uncomfortable. And again, that's a representation of what happens when you become overly contracted. It starts to feel uncomfortable. You feel limited. You feel ineffective. You feel stuck. You feel as though you are holding on to something that is serving no purpose. It's just a position you've taken out of habit, out of compulsion, out of fear, but it's not doing you any good, and you know that, and it feels bad. So what do? Well, the important thing with scanning is to remember that you are always in complete control of your state of consciousness. It's always up to you. You can reverse your state of consciousness at any time by choosing to do so. And how do we do it? We simply expand. 3, 2, 1, release. You just did it. Drop your hands to your sides. Take a deep, deep breath. And another. And another. Now sit for 15 seconds in absolute stillness and silence. Continue to breathe. So it's very important now that you pay attention to what just happened. What we did was very simple and yet very meaningful. We put ourselves into a state of contraction. We used our hands to represent our very being, our very consciousness. That was us. We squeezed and we felt what that feels like. Rigid, tight, limited, restricted, uncomfortable, bad. And then we made a conscious decision, 3, 2, 1, to expand. Do the opposite of contraction. You can either contract or expand. You can't do both at the same time. Once you've expanded, you stop contracting. So we decided to expand. We dropped our hands, let all the tension go out of our arms. Then we took 3 deep breaths. Breaths are expansive by nature. So we continued in this expansive direction. 3 deep breaths. Do it with me now. And then we sat for 15 seconds in absolute stillness and silence. And we'll talk about that in a second. And the reason we sit in absolute stillness, when you make a conscious decision to sit in absolute stillness, you remember the game when you were a kid, red light, green light? Kids would be advancing on you, turn around, you say red light, and they'd have to freeze. You say green light, turn around, they start moving toward you, say red light, they'd freeze. So that sort of freezing, taking a frozen position, that conscious decision to stop all movement, is a way of sending a signal to your body that we are no longer taking action. We have stopped. Whatever you were doing, whatever you're thinking, stop. Just stop. Freeze. This is another way of stopping the contractive process. We sit in absolute silence because silence is the opposite of words and thoughts, which are contractions, formations of thoughts and ideas. So all of these are little steps to move us into a more expanded position. As a matter of habit, as a matter of course, we contract, but we're training ourselves to, on demand, when we decide to, expand, which will in turn change your state of consciousness, bring you to a place of peace, quiet, stillness, calm. Let's do it again. Squeeze your hands together. That's contraction. That's what we do 90% of the day, probably. We're busy sending emails, posting, tweeting, talking, arguing, building, destroying, running, walking, arguing, making decisions, having thoughts, anxious, obsessive thoughts, sometimes wonderful thoughts, but forming ideas. These are contractions. So we do that all day. We're used to that. It's familiar. It's useful. It's the stuff of life. But when we become overly contracted, We become uncomfortable, stiff, rigid, limited. We feel bad. Typically, we hold our breath. If we're holding a position, a contracted position, we also tend to hold our breath. We're holding a position. We've stopped being flexible, available, aware. We've taken a position and we're holding it rigidly. You know how inflexible people can be unpleasant because they just refuse to be conscious or accepting of any idea other than what they're holding on to. Well, that's what's happened. You've taken a position, so we're holding it. But we can reverse that. Let's do it again. 3, 2, 1, release. You just did it. Feel the difference. Your hands, your muscles, your body are under no obligation. You've decided to stop contracting and begin the expansive process. Take 3 deep, deep breaths. 15 seconds of complete stillness and silence. So it's very difficult to break the contractive cycle. If you can imagine, once something becomes tight and it tightens, it just wants to hold that position. And anything attempting to pull it out of that position is faced with great resistance. You become resistant, you're holding. So I will admit to you, I try to be honest here in these sessions, that I have been in a very contractive state over the past several days. I think a lot of it has to do with the state of the world. Unfortunately, I read the news like everyone does, and it makes me anxious. It makes me wonder what the future holds. It makes me wonder what I should do about it. So I find myself thinking a lot, debating a lot, arguing a lot, coming up with positions that make me feel secure and safe. And that's all very contractive type actions. So I find myself cornered in a hole, holding that position, frozen, solid. And again, you tend to stop breathing, so you become oxygen deprived. You begin to feel like you're literally dying because you forced yourself into this held position. And you become even more anxious. So what do? You contract some more, and it's a cycle. So I've had to work very hard the past few days to practice what I preach and practice this technique and expand. And I've had success to a degree, but it's a constant battle. And this is why I practice so often, because I'm trying to train myself to make it a conditioned response. And I'll tell you something else now, which is sort of amusing. The videos I post, some of them you're able to track. Depending on where you post them, you're able to track them on Facebook. And you'll be able to see what sort of people are listening to your videos and following your videos. And gender, age, location, and so forth. And the interesting thing is most of the people that follow these videos are within my age range and my gender, male, 60s. These are the people who are following this video. I'm basically speaking to my people, which made me begin to reflect on why is it that people who are older would tend to struggle with this contraction expansion process even more than anyone's younger. And I think it's pretty clear. It's because we've been doing it all our lives. And as you get older, you begin to become even more locked into your habits, your behaviors. And if contraction is a solution to problems and it's become your go-to solution, you become even more contracted by nature, and you find yourself even more cornered, even more restricted by your own choices, behavioral choices. And so there's relief to be found in expansion. And so this process has a certain appeal to people within my age group and gender who tend to habitually contract as a solution. And you don't like to think of yourself as an older, cranky person, but that's what starts to happen. If you've ever met a person as they advance into their 60s or 70s, they start to get sort of cranky and angry. And it's because they've locked in. They've become so habitually contracted as a go-to solution to their problems that they find themselves cornered in this position. And it's not a happy place to be. So it's all the more important, not only that people in my age range and gender learn to expand, but that if you're younger, you notice this and catch it early. You catch this process early. You begin to realize early in life that contraction is, as a go-to solution, has its limits, has its drawbacks. And practice expansion early in your life so that as you advance in years and you become more limited in your choices, shall we say, that you know how to expand. Have this available as a tool. It's an ongoing process, a constant process. But through practice, you can become better and better at it. So let's do this one more time. And then we will move into what I call the nuts and bolts of the process, which is the actual incremental muscular release. Again, what we're doing here is we're practicing expansion. We're practicing expansion. We're making it a skill which we can have available to us on an as-need basis to allow ourselves to pull ourselves out of contracted difficult held positions, which make us unhappy. Squeeze your hands together, tight, 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 tight. Feel that. Strength is good. There's nothing wrong with having strength, being able to contract. It is the stuff of life. We get up in the morning and we begin our day, we contract. We make decisions, we take actions. We go to work, we solve problems through contraction. The only problem is when we become overly contracted. And then it's diminishing returns. You're restricted, you're limited, you're tight, you're holding. You've taken an inflexible position. You're unavailable to possibility, so the world seems closed off, dark, depressive. You see negative possibilities as opposed to positive possibilities. When you become overly contracted, what we're training ourselves to do is to expand as a solution. And we do that simply through choice. 3, 2, 1, release. You just expanded. Drop your hands. Take 5 deep breaths. 30 seconds of absolute, complete stillness and silence. But continue to breathe. Deep breath. So take an assessment, because we're halfway through the process now. We've done what I call the preliminary steps towards expansion, scanning. Take a second to sort of assess and see if you detect any changes in your system. And I've done it many different ways. You could say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most contracted, let's say you've moved to a 9 or an 8 or a 7. But just notice the difference. It's important. It's important that you acknowledge the change that you've induced within yourself, because that will encourage you to keep practicing. And it can be a small change, doesn't matter. You're either expanding or contracting. If you've expanded, you've stopped contracting, so it's a success. For myself, I always have the same exact shift. I go into what I call the I don't give a shit mode. I suddenly have this sense come over me that I don't care as much. I'm not obsessing about certain things. I don't feel these compulsive emotions that make me feel there's something I need to be doing. There's some problem I need to be solving. There's something I need to be thinking about. That's diminished. And it's been replaced with a sense of whatever. And that's not to say I don't care, but I've detached myself from those compulsive feelings. I'm just me, to a small degree. And a lot of anxiety, a lot of compulsion, a lot of contraction is based on a reaction to what we perceive as a problem that needs to be solved. And this process of expansion allows you to detach from that perception and for a moment feel as though, no worries. If there are problems, I'll get to them. But in this moment, I've stopped being quite as concerned. By expanding, by detaching, by letting go, you've given yourself a reprieve for a moment. You've checked out. And not in a bad way, not in a negative way. It's self-preservation. You need to do this. You can't always be chasing your tail. You need to be able to find moments in the day when you can detach and say, I'm just going to be. You just come back to yourself. Now, there's many ways to achieve this state. One is scanning, expansion. There's also chemical assist. Alcohol, dope, pills. Anything which detaches you from these external attachments, gives you that sense of relief. And that's why people ingest these chemicals and drugs and so forth. But that's not a healthy choice. We all know that. So it's best if you avoid it. If you can achieve this naturally, it's best. Anything you involve yourself in, which takes your full attention and takes that attention away from these things which have been obsessing you, can be helpful. Hobbies, golf, that's why people golf. Needlepoint, jogging. These are all things we do to detach ourselves from these external worries and anxieties, if only for a moment. And it's great. It's all great. Scanning is just another way. If you can't go anywhere, can't do anything, nothing available to you but yourself, if you're lying in bed at night trying to sleep, this is a great go-to for expanding, for detaching yourself. So that's the difference I feel. I feel a little bit calmer. So let's continue. Again, what we're doing is expanding. The muscles are the perfect way to approach expansion because muscles can either contract or release. That's all they do is contract or release. Your muscle is either contracting or relaxing. So it's the perfect metaphor. It's the perfect tool for expanding. If we can learn to muscularly release tension, we are indeed, in fact, expanding our consciousness. It's all mixed together. These things aren't separate, the consciousness, the body, the soul, the heart. It's all connected. If you can expand one part of yourself, muscular or otherwise, everything else will follow. I choose to work with the muscles because the muscles are simple. They can either contract or expand. If you try to expand your mind, if you try to meditate, and meditation's fine, but if you try to, I'm going to not think this, I'm going to think that, it's very difficult to control muscles. They can do a million things. The mind. The mind can do a million things. The muscles can either contract or expand. So I choose to work in scanning with the muscles. So let's start. On my count, I want you to release the muscular tension in your face. And watch. 3, 2, 1, release. That's all we're doing. Very simple. Follow me. 3, 2, 1, release. Pay attention to how that felt. That sensation of release accompanied by a sensation of relief is what we're looking for. And I say relief because holding muscular tension takes effort. It takes energy. We do it all day long. We carry around a low level of tension all day long. It takes energy. It's exhausting. So when you can release muscular tension, you've taken that obligation off of your system. You've freed up that energy, and it's a relief. It's like you've taken a little vacation. The face no longer has to work so hard, as will the rest of the muscles. The face, 3, 2, 1, release. Moving through these quickly now, the top of the head, 3, 2, 1, release. You'll feel a slight dropping sensation. It's very important that you pay attention to how that feels because you're studying these sensations so that you can repeat them. Again, we're practicing the incremental release of muscular tension as a means to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. You have to practice to become aware of the process. The top of the head, 3, 2, 1, release. The back of the head, 3, 2, 1, release. And I snap my fingers because it should feel like a switch has been turned off. If you have power to these muscles, so watch my face, 3, 2, 1. I turn the power off. I let the muscles go. And that's what we're doing all through the body. The back of the head, 3, 2, 1, release. And you'll feel a dropping sensation which will begin to spread through your entire body. You'll feel other parts of your body release as you release these specific muscle groups, and that's what should happen. The neck, 3, 2, 1, release. Again, look for that dropping release sensation. The shoulders, let them drop, 3, 2, 1, release. The next zone is the chest and stomach down into the waist, 3, 2, 1, release. It's okay to slouch in your chair. Again, we're letting go of muscular tension. A level of tension that you have maintained throughout the entire day and night. You've just held it. We do it out of fear. We do it out of habit. We do it out of compulsion. It doesn't need to be there. You can let go of this muscular tension. You can expand the musculature. Again, the chest, stomach, and waist. 3, 2, 1, release. Feel that dropping. Feel the entire body letting go of muscular tension. You're completely letting go. You know, I don't drink anymore, but I used to. And I do remember, I just remember looking forward to that sensation. I'd have a shot or a beer or whatever, and I'd wait. And I'd be talking, whatever, but I'd wait. And at some point there'd be this, and I'd feel it sweep over my body, this release. I had chemically induced expansion. The chemical had induced my muscles to release and relax. And that was what I was always looking for, that relief, that sense of relief from the tension I was carrying all the time. And then I'd drink some more to try to release it some more. And then, then I'd get sick and, have a hangover and feel stupid the next day. So, I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to find a natural way to achieve this state. And that's what scanning is. The next zone is the back. 3, 2, 1, release. You'll feel it just let go. Again, 3, 2, 1, release. Deep breath. And by now, you've moved the dial. That's all we're looking to do. We were here. We moved between contraction and expansion all day long. We were here. We were stuck. and we've moved ourselves back towards expansion. So you should start to feel a sense of release and relief. It might be small, it doesn't matter. If you're expanding, you are no longer contracting. You might drift back into contraction, but you have begun the process. You've established a momentum towards expansion, and watch for that. You're building momentum. It's cumulative. So watch for the signs that you're starting to let go. You're breathing, you're relaxing, you're settling into your chair. Your compulsive thoughts and feelings and ideas have diminished. The mind is a muscle of sorts. As you begin to relax the body, the muscles of the body, the mind follows suit and relaxes and lets go of all the obsessive, anxious thoughts it was holding on to, and they drift away. So you're beginning to feel a sense of calm and quiet, stillness, peace. You're beginning to feel more in the moment and less pulled out of yourself by all these external processes and thoughts and worries. You're settling into yourself. You know, without our thoughts and worries and anxieties and compulsive, ideas, we're just here. We're just existing. There are many health benefits to this process. If we're not constantly gearing up to solve a problem, our blood pressure drops. It's healthy. So again, the back, 3, 2, 1, release. And you'll start to get a sense, there'll be a sense of, oh, I get it. Initially, and I still go through this, even though I practiced it for a long time, there's a resistance. Resistance is natural. When you are in a contracted position, it is a resistant position. You are resistant to change. You don't want to change. And you will come up with all sorts of excuses why this feels bad, I don't like it, it's not working, etc., etc. This is a waste of time. But as you begin to release and let go, you'll start to feel a sort of willingness to go forward with the process. You'll start to sense and understand the benefit, and those feelings of resistance will dissipate, and you will allow yourself to slip into this relaxed, comfortable position, this stillness and silence and calm in the moment. And again, because we are practicing, we're training ourselves, you'll begin to recognize that this place of stillness and quiet and calm, is an excellent choice. Whereas we habitually think that contraction is the best choice for solving our problems, you begin to understand through this process that stillness, relaxing, expansion, calm, quiet is as effective, if not more effective, a choice. You add this to your repertoire of choices, your life choices. Every day we wake up, I, Larry Cedar, you, whoever you may be, says, here are my choices. Here are the things that I've chosen as my tools for dealing with life. We all have our habitual tools, some healthier than others, some we wish we didn't have, but we do them. It's our toolkit. So by studying this process, and by seeing the benefits of stillness and quiet and calm, by seeing this as a choice under duress, we add this tool to our toolkit. And if we train regularly, it becomes available to us. So in a moment of stress, in a moment when facing a problem, you don't just go to your go-to anxiety or compulsiveness or thinking or action. You think, well, I have another choice here. I have another choice, and that's just to take a moment and be still and be quiet and see if that helps. I guarantee you it will. The difficulty is it goes against our instincts. Again, you're facing a lifetime of habitual behavior, a lifetime of choosing contraction as the solution. And as I mentioned to you, a lot of people who follow this, who follow my classes, are men of my age. They're in their 60s, and they have trouble with contraction because they've been doing it longer than anybody. It's become a deeply ingrained habit, very difficult to break. So they recognize that, and they see the benefits of expansion. When you're younger, you're naturally expansive. Youth are expansive by nature. Everything's available. Everything's possible. Something bad happens, so what? Something good will happen tomorrow. It's all available. It's fantastic. It's the beauty of youth. There's just an openness, a willingness. But if you're young, it's useful to be aware of that. And as you move into your elder years, to be aware of that expansiveness that you had and maintain that, keep that. Keep your youthfulness. They always say, the beauty of some people is they seem so young at heart. Well, it's because they're open. They're open, they're available. They don't take things so seriously. They're not as stuck in certain ways of behavior. And we're attracted to them because we see their freedom. We see their emotional behavioral freedom, and we wish we could be that free, so we're drawn to people like that. So be one of those people. Be an open, expansive, available person. A person who's willing to just be in the moment. That's expansion. So we did the back, now we're going to move into the pelvis. Think about the tension you hold in your pelvis. And some people don't even think about it, but there's a lot of sort of sensitive areas in the pelvis that cause us to tense up and hold and be anxious and afraid. So just for a moment, think of the tension you're holding there. 3, 2, 1, release. Just let go. And sometimes you're holding tension in areas you're not even aware of. The reason we, what I call scan the body, is we are looking for pockets of tension. 90% of this technique is self-awareness, building a self-awareness, building an awareness of how you function, of how your body works. Instead of just reacting in every situation and not knowing why you did what you did, then having to apologize later for perhaps just being so reactive. Study yourself. See how you react in situations, understand why and how it happens. Become aware of the feelings and sensations in your body. You know, therapy is very useful. I've tried therapy, and it's very useful in that it helps you understand yourself. I find you can achieve the same results by a physical awareness. If you study your body and how it reacts to situations, it's enormously educational. So if you see how you physically react to situations, why you contract in certain situations, why you expand in others, and think about why it's happening, you can begin to understand yourself and help yourself. So the pelvis, 3, 2, 1, release. And the final zone is down the legs, over the knees, and into the feet. 3, 2, 1, let your feet go. Now you say, I wasn't even thinking about my feet. How do you think about your feet? How do you relax the tension in the top of your head, your feet? Well, you practice. You will see that you can focus your attention on a particular zone, muscular area, and you can induce the slightest, smallest muscular release. Just practice. The feet, 3, 2, 1, release. And again, the feet, 3, 2, 1, release. Take a deep breath. So it's been about a half an hour. I like to keep these sessions to a half an hour. These are just practice sessions. When I practice on my own, I typically will take a half an hour, sometimes an hour if I can afford it, and that's all I do. I gently bring myself out of a contracted state into an expanded state. It doesn't matter how far you go. What matters is that you expand and that you're conscious of your ability to do it. It's very important. We tend to think of ourselves as victimized by life. It just happens to us. We react. We can't control it. We don't know what to do. We feel like we're out of control, so we have a drink because it's just driving us crazy, or we smoke a joint or whatever. It's just pretty frightening, especially under duress like these days. But if you can pay attention to what your body is doing and begin to look at the universe and yourself as fluctuating between a state of contraction and expansion. Recognize contraction as something that makes you feel bad, and simultaneously recognize that you can bring yourself out of that contraction by expanding through the simple incremental release of muscular tension. So I'm going to review. We started what I call the preliminary steps. Squeeze your hands. This is what I call the binary metaphor. It shows you that you're capable of being either in a state of contraction or 3, 2, 1 expansion. Note the difference. Take a series of deep breaths. These are expansive by nature. Again, all we're doing is moving the dial. Sit in absolute stillness and silence for 15 seconds. Stillness to indicate to your body, to send it a message that we've stopped acting. We've stopped. Stop. It's like saying to a kid, all right, sit down. Time out. Stop what you were doing for a few seconds. We're going to reset. And silence to bring our obsessive thoughts, our anxious thoughts and words to a close. These are the preliminary steps. And you'll feel a resistance to this process because contraction is resistant by nature. It wants to hold on to its state of being. You'll find yourself holding your breath when you're in this state because it is a position of holding. It's rigid, but we're moving ourselves out of that. The deep breaths, the stillness and silence are gently nudging us in the right direction. You follow that by the incremental release of muscular tension in the various muscle groups. And you can pick your own, but focus on an area. 3, 2, 1, the face, let it go. That sensation of letting go is what we're looking for. That's what you want to practice, and you want to repeat 100 times. It's something we don't do very often. It's unfamiliar. It's not a go-to choice in life. We tend to problem, contract. Problem, contract. We don't. Problem, expand. let go. See what happens. So it's difficult to retrain ourselves. And I started this session by asking, is it possible to change our basic nature? It's difficult. It's very difficult, but you can train yourself. I've begun to recognize that I may never change. My basic nature may never change, but I can guide it. I can influence it. I can keep my distance from behaviors which I know are not healthy and move myself towards behaviors which are healthy. And I will struggle with this the rest of my life. I have my basic nature, and I will always be struggling with it, working with it, but to greater or lesser effect. I do know that if I practice expansion, and if I can bring expansion into my life to a greater and greater degree, I will find more peace, happiness, joy, calm, stillness, satisfaction. That's why I practice. So if this has been beneficial to you, I hope it has. I try to be here every day. I've taken a few days off, but I do try to come every day. I will admit to you that as much as I practice, there are times when it's really challenging, but I know the benefits, so I continue. I like to end every session by saying that rule number one in life is love yourself. Love is the most expansive choice you can make in life. If you want to just expand on the spot, love. Start with loving yourself. Love yourself. When you love yourself, you accept, you open up, you're available. And when you have so much love in you that it's literally spilling over, take the extra and pass it around to the rest of us, because we could all use it. I'm going to repost this on my Facebook page and the Sqanning Facebook page, Sqanning, so you can like and follow if you want to hear about new sessions as they come up. Feel free to share this session. And best of luck to you. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.